welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming. In the current series of requests for recaps, one of the games that people most requested recaps of were my Curseborne Chronicles, which I've only just started running for some of the supporters of my Patreon. We run over on the Discord server that I maintain, and they have their characters there. They get involved in in-character and out-of-character interactions, largely by text, and then we actually run our role-playing sessions once per month. Now, as I say, I've got two groups running through Curseborne right now, and I'm running two different scenarios for them, so I need to consider whether I want to make two sets of recap videos, or whether I just focus on this one group. But for now, we will focus on what I will call Group A, who are setting their game in Junction City. The other group are as well, which is my fictional city somewhere in the state of Iowa, largely isolated from much of the urban sprawl. I mean, it is in Iowa. A city largely built on timber and steel, and while the steel has left, the timber has continued, of course, surrounded by cornfields for miles and miles. The more run-down, destitute Allenstown isn't more than an hour's drive away. Maybe at one point intended to be a suburb, but grew into its own blossoming rot. And Junction City, as I've made clear in other videos about it, is a city of, I guess, paradoxes. It styles itself as a cultural hub. It has 4 theatres within about 2 blocks of each other, has a number of galleries and places where accursed from the Sphinx and Premier families are likely to ply their wares, not to mention the heirs of the Hungry lineage. It, as I say, also has the still booming timber trade, where most of the people who work there are the sons of fathers who worked there in generations before. But there is a steady downgrade. It is predicted on the economic index that within 2 decades, Junction City will have fallen down the tubes, much as many cities in the Rust Belt have done. So, Junction City is a city on the precipice, and of course the accursed that dwell within it may be contributing to that. They may be contributing to the blight on this town, but they may just be survivors of it. They may be people who are trying to help the city and those that they love who live within it. Let's introduce you to the characters being played in this campaign. First and foremost, we have Princess Cixi Wang, who is an exiled... Well, she wouldn't style herself as exiled. She is a member of the aristocracy of a fictional Asian country. This was by design of the player, who, while I won't identify the player, is part Chinese. I don't feel like I'm being terribly appropriative or disrespectful to invent an Asian country, but I just wanted to make that clear to you. The country is Khmeria, somewhere between Cambodia and Vietnam. And Princess Cixi or Cixi and her family are, for whatever reason, in Junction City. Clearly, the regime in Khmeria is going very well indeed. She is an heir of the Hungry lineage. She is a figurehead of culture, or styles herself as one, and does charity events. That's most of what, I guess, brings her recognition. She has, of course, noble parents and the expectation and pressure to marry. Does lots of fundraising events with hospitals and morgues, because after all, as an heir, she has to have access to hearts. The fact that the player, who I love dearly, wanted a character who could do charitable events related to morgues is just stunning to me. The idea that a character might be able to do that. Hospitals, yes. Morgues, not many charities focus on them. This character, excuse me, this character has the torment of take what's mine. So the Hungry are often drawn to imposing their birthright rule over others. They all believe themselves to be a form of nobility, and therefore when they succumb to the torment, they basically try to seize items, goods, services that they believe they should have. She'll demand attention, service of others, take anything she feels she should own, especially if it disadvantages the rest of the crew. Of course, fulfilling a torment in Curseborne is a good way to generate things like momentum and curse dice. She also has a personal torment, draw attention to herself out of neediness, especially at inappropriate moments. The heir inheritance she's gone for is she went for the inheritance tied to the heirs rather than hungry. Her influence seeps from her, therefore she gains +1 social advantage on actions to persuade others. And if she has eaten a heart in that session, another character with +1 social advantage loses their advantage. She, of course, has the hungry damnation where she needs to feed. Next up, we have Hugo Everwood, a poltergeist of the dead lineage, a truly tragic character, a toy maker, old-fashioned artisan in a sort of Geppetto kind of a way. Wasn't doing wonderful business before becoming dead and is doing even worse business now. He and his family lived in the upper floor of a shop that he ran, and presumably he has ran for quite some time. The ground floor was a workshop. They were all of them murdered by a home invasion, a gang incident by some local wannabe gangsters. And one night, the conflict on the streets escalated, and the entire Everwood family was killed. Now, interestingly, Hugo's wife and children all exist as phantasms. They are basically ghosts that are caught in cycles. They have very limited awareness. They can sometimes be brought to a state of lucidity, but for the most part, they are quite single-minded, I guess you could say. But Hugo returned as one of the dead, a poltergeist, who is, of course, driven as a poltergeist to evoke fear in others. He chose the accursed torment of yearning for life. Therefore, he wants to spend time among the living. He tries to make himself as memorable as possible to those he cares about, from leaving overbearing love notes in unusual places to full-blown poltergeist activity in this case. His personal torment, just to contradict his poltergeist side, is he wants to provoke joy in others, because he is, after all, a toy maker. The inheritance he went for is the poltergeist inheritance. Once per scene, while incorporeal, he may apply the dread area effect on the area at a moderate complication instead of minor. And he has the dead damnation, of course, where he is pushed by the urges to feel emotions and take extreme actions to yield them. Then we have Arturo, our 8 hands, our Ocho of the primal lineage, a hardened criminal who's just out of prison, for a crime that he doesn't like to talk about. He had a girl when he went in, but he doesn't have one now. He never got to know his folks, and it was a criminal godfather, so to speak, who introduced him to crime. Arturo is a rough kind of individual, has a lot of criminal contacts as well. Went for the elemental fury torment, so the primal being thunder, earthquakes, and hurricanes given form. They rage at an elemental level. When in a scene, the primal, this character, Arturo, will focus on the biggest, most deadly target in the area, preventing her from assisting or interacting with allies unless they're in the way, in which case they probably get shoved aside. Personal tormentors allow no humiliation to go unanswered or unpunished. Went for the 8 hands inheritance. The web you weave is your lifeblood to information. Basically, this character can start stealing contacts from others. And the primal damnation, of course, a ceaseless predator, the urge to hunt. They exert themselves as a force of nature whenever the curse dice pool reaches 0. So, next up, we have Waylon Cousins, a Zed of the dead lineage, a recovering drug addict, would snort the lint from a coat pocket if he thought it would get him high. He hit rock bottom and he realised life couldn't continue going on this way. Probably because he died. He has family, but they cut him off, went into rehab and emerged into a world where he didn't have anything. Currently between employment, doesn't have much in the way of skills beyond criminal contacts, lots of friends in low places. Has done some less than legal things, it's fair to say. The torment he went for was corporeal longing. He likes to force himself into various new forms, and his personal torment was to push people away when they act on a positive attitude toward him. He took the Z inheritance, where he basically can gains access to the Death's Door trick on close combat attacks. Basically, his attacks all come with a slow-acting toxin status effect, or he can basically apply it. And finally, of course, the Dead Damnation, again, pushing urges. In the case of the Z, it's for oblivion, it's destruction entirely. We then established why the characters know each other. This is something I always find very important in any game, especially a horror game, where people can often be driven by self-interest rather than communal interest. And so, for example, we established that Arturo, our Ocho, passed on a line of code while in the jailhouse to Waylon, our Z, for $1,000. Basically, Waylon delivered that code to another criminal contact, and they earned a bond of trust there. Meanwhile, Princess Cece and Hugo, Princess Cece has a true crime hobby and sponsors a Spotify podcast and went into Hugo's former shop and found his ghost. Likewise, Hugo makes toys traditional to Camaria, so that is a nice link for Cece's past. Cece once hired Arturo to smuggle hearts, and Cece once sponsored the halfway house that Waylon stayed at. She showed up once, maybe to cut a ribbon. Hugo approached Arturo to settle the need for vengeance against the gang that killed his family. And we also had Waylon, who broke into people's houses to steal and sell stolen toys, tried to sell magic cards and G.I. Joes to Hugo. He wasn't interested, but would occasionally offer Waylon, Hugo would offer Waylon a sandwich or a cup of coffee whenever he swung by. So there we had our attachments. Now, our story started with Princess Cece in a statue gallery, a very exclusive statue gallery run by one of the city's heirs, Esther Iverson, something of a popular figure, a celebrity about town, it should be said, both in the arts and in politics. The heirs like to put their fingers in as many pies as possible. And for some reason, Iverson, who has largely ignored Princess Cece since her arrival in Junction City, needed to ask her a favour, something she wouldn't do herself. But before the favour could be asked, Princess Cece successfully got a cruel failure in the very first roll of the game that resulted in her shattering a priceless piece of marble sculpture donated to the gallery by one of the city's sphinx, Cat Primal. This was a great way to start, and it also motivated our player, playing Cece, to start using her powers to basically alter Esther Iverson's mind, to make her think she had broken this piece of art. Amazingly, she was successful at doing so, though, of course, if Iverson ever re-watches the security footage, or the question ever arises, how was the statue broken, the truth may well come out. Separately from this, Princess Cece ends up trying to use all of her contacts capable to find someone who can make an identical copy of the sculpture, and basically got Iverson's approval to do so. Well, I went with a nice traditional opening plot for a horror game. Someone is missing, and Iverson wants Cece to track this person down. It's another one of the heirs in the city, someone quite lowly placed on the lowest rung of society, but still a member of the family, and we can't abandon family no matter how much we may loathe them. And this is an individual by the name of Tommy Earl, one of the city's heirs, a bit of a low-rent drug and weapons dealer. And so she has asked Cece, keep it in the family, or at the very least just to the friends you can trust. I want to find out where Tommy Earl is, because he's gone missing. He's been missing for well over a week now, and his family are worried. Not worried about him, worried that he might be embarrassing himself and therefore the family. While this is going on, Arturo and Waylon are currently occupying a roadhouse, playing pool and hustling other customers. They are trying to force Arturo to fail at the game of pool, despite the fact he looks much more capable, and therefore earn money through bets on Waylon, who looks a lot more shabby, given that he is a dead drug addict. The dice rolls associated with this they veer between good and bad. At one point, unfortunately, Waylon earns himself a cruel failure and ends up taking on the unlucky status effect, which basically means every action until he undoes the status effect will come with a minor complication, which left unresolved will result in bad things happening to him associated with poor luck. But, crucially, the majority of the rolls that went into playing this game of pool and hustling the other gamblers went successfully. They earned a little bit of scratch. Joni, who runs the Roadhouse, basically said, why don't you take your game somewhere where you can earn a little more money? And they kind of laughed it off. After which they spoke about what they'd heard of from Princess Cece. Tommy Earl. Yeah, both of them had interactions with him at one point or other. Arturo had worked with Tommy Earl on and off, but Tommy wasn't associated with any of the known or established gangs in the city, whereas Arturo most certainly is. So Arturo sees him as scum, quite frankly, who often gets underfoot, quite frankly. He needs to be brought to heel. Waylon, on the other hand, at one point, Tommy was his drug supplier, so he has a more personal connection with Earl. It's still not one of affection. Both of them consider that Tommy is the kind of person who'd be very late in making a payment to you, but very quick to collect if you owed him. Meanwhile, we had Hugo. Hugo was in his workshop and at work when the phantasm of his wife started descending the stairs, as she often did, crying, worrying about her children, because, of course, in the loop she is caught in, this ghost, she feels like her children are permanently under attack, being murdered. And she was begging Hugo, please, you have to save them. Now, he used one of his spells, the ability to commune, to basically get through to her. He rolled well. It was a clash, but he did well. And he got through to her and comforted her, brought her to a state of lucidity, as mentioned before, and told her that they were all right. It was already done. The gang weren't here anymore, and he was going to solve it. He was going to bring justice for them. It brought her comfort. She disappeared to be with her children, who were crying upstairs in a permanent state of ghostly fear. And Hugo knew that his wife would, soon enough return to her state of, perpetual ghastly melancholia. Annabelle, her name is, and she will show up again later in the campaign, I promise you that. Princess Cece showed up at the store shortly after Annabelle was sent upstairs and explained to Hugo what exactly was going on. Unbeknownst to any of them, although the players are aware, when she mentioned Tommy Earl, there was something in the back of his mind that told Hugo that he should know the name, but for whatever reason it didn't stick. I told the players what this was, even though the character doesn't know. When the gangsters invaded the shop and killed Hugo's family, one of them was addressed as Tommy. Hugo couldn't remember that, maybe because he had been knocked out, or because he'd been killed, quite frankly, at the time. So, for now, he doesn't remember the connection to Tommy Earl, that Tommy is one of the people who helped kill his family. So they put their resources together, did the group, and the characters evaluated, especially our more criminal element of characters, that Tommy used to primarily get his supply at a bathhouse in town, a popular joint for gay men, typically, to hook up, whether it was to take things like bath salts or actually have sex, or somewhere slightly exclusive and restricted, and that they would be best off checking there. The owner, J.C. Chevalier, is a man who has run many businesses in Junction City, but he started out with this lowly bathhouse, a small safe haven, a sanctuary for the LGBTQ plus community in times gone by. And while now he has opened clubs, restaurants, and bars, his office is still above the bathhouse. So our characters headed there. and they decided they would take multiple tactics. They didn't think Tommy Earl would be inside, but they thought they might be able to get some answers as to his whereabouts. So, for example, Wayland decided he would enter as a customer paying cash on tutorial, essentially going into the main bath area and ask some of the people sitting around whether they knew of Tommy. Unfortunately, he didn't yield many answers. Likewise, Arturo broke in to the bathhouse through the service entrance when one of the members of staff, an attendant in a smock, went out for a cigarette, left the door open with a breeze block. Arturo snuck in very stealthily, as an 8-hands should, and got to the lone computer terminal in the office and was basically looking for records on Tommy Earl under customers and employees. Found Tommy Earl as a customer, as a member indeed, and located that he had an address in the inner city. Very unlike an heir to have a flop house as an address, but that's what he registered when he signed up at the bathhouse. Interesting for Arturo. Arturo basically succeeded with so many hits on that role that he could effectively download all of the information and email it to himself, and so he did. And what's more, he basically signed Wayland up as a prank to the bathhouse and noted various illicit preferences of his so that the bathhouse could best accommodate him. Wayland didn't provide his name at the desk, so for now he'll be saved from that kind of thing. This kind of network building, this idea of accumulating information, plays exactly into an Ocho, an 8-hands family path. So at this, he earned a curse die. Likewise, earlier, when the crew got together to discuss their plans at Princess Cece's safe house, a mansion basically in the outer city, she consumed a heart while they're in soup, a very pleasant meal that no one else, and some of the other members of the crew did share it at that. But she consumed a heart, and likewise she gained a curse die for that. I'm not going to keep track of all the curse dice in momentum, and I'll tell you this crew knows how to spend momentum. They burned through it in this game. Princess Cece, meanwhile, arrived at reception while Hugo was with her incorporeal. He had left his body in Cece's limousine. And Cece basically said, I am arriving for my tour. And she bluffed her way. Despite the fact it is a men's-only night this Thursday, she bluffed her way to get an audience with J.C. Chevalier, the owner of the bathhouse, and a personal tour. Not where any of the men happen to be right now, because they might be up to things that a young woman shouldn't witness. But she will get some time with Chevalier where she might be able to find out a little about Tommy Earl and whether he's been working specifically for Chevalier on the up and up or in more low-down territory. That is where our session ends. The investigation begins. Where is Tommy Earl? Why has he vanished? Who is Chevalier really? Is he one of the accursed? Is the bathhouse a front for something else? We will find out in our next session of Curseborne. If there are specific questions you have about Curseborne and about this campaign as it's running, please do ask them in the comments. I will be happy to answer as much as I can, as long as I don't spoil anything for the players, because I'm sure some of them will check this video out too. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.